The biggest thing for teams to unlearn is the info dump. We can't just regurgitate all of the things that we do for every industry, for every type of buyer at every point in time. We need to start to reframe a lot of these conversations and approach buyers as a trusted partner.
This is Mental Selling, the sales podcast for people who are dedicated to making a difference in customers' lives. We're here to help you unlock sales talent, win more relationships, and transform your business with integrity. I'm your host, Hayley Parr. Let's get right into it. Welcome back to the Mental Selling podcast, brought to you by Integrity Solutions, where we explore the mindset and skill set behind high-performance sales leadership. Today's conversation is all about level setting, how go-to-market teams need to think as we head into 2026. Because the way buyers buy has fundamentally changed, and many sales and marketing teams are still operating off outdated assumptions. By the time a buyer talks to a seller today, they're often not deciding who to include. They're deciding who to exclude. They've already self-educated across peer communities, content, AI tools, podcasts, and internal conversations. And that reality forces a shift in how we earn relevance, interpret intent, and turn insight into real revenue conversations. To help us unpack what's actually happening before sales is engaged and how sales and marketing can work together to respond, I'm excited to welcome back M. Holldorf, Director of Demand Generation here at Integrity Solutions. M sits right at the intersection of buyer behavior, messaging, and revenue impact as it relates to operations and demand generation. She's deeply focused on how modern buyers form opinions outside the funnel, what signals actually indicate readiness, and how teams can move from generic messaging to recognition-driven conversations that resonate in real time. Today, we'll talk about the go-to-market mindsets sellers need to unlearn as we head into 2026, what meaningful higher funnel behavior really looks like and why it's often hard to spot, and how insight becomes usable language for sellers, not just campaigns for marketing. We'll also wrap with some rapid-fire takes on what's in and what's out for sales and marketing this year. So let's get started. M, welcome back to the Mental Selling Podcast. Your second episode.
Woo!
Woo! I can't think of a better way to kick off our first recording of the year. Can you?
I cannot. You're coming up on a year two as the host, so I think you deserve a little bit of praise, a little bit of a round of applause for almost a great first year hosting.
Thank you so much. It was a fast year. It was a busy year. A lot to look back on, but here we are. A lot to celebrate. And I think that was kind of the impetus of this episode is there have been a lot of learnings in the last year and a lot of themes that keep popping up, not just in the world of podcasting, but in the world of go-to-market trends and sales and marketing teams that are as tightly aligned as ours here at Integrity Solutions. So I think you would agree that was kind of the brainchild of this episode is getting a sense of what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and how we can help sales leaders and our mental selling listeners get a grasp of trends that we're seeing in 2026 and how they can really leverage those insights to have a banger of a year. So I'd love to start by some level setting. One of the biggest themes that we're seeing right now is that by the time a buyer actually talks to a seller, they're often not deciding who to include. They're deciding who's not even on the bench. There's a lot going on in the background, which as a marketer can drive you crazy. Can you imagine to be a fly on the wall for every conversation and buying decision that happens in rooms that we have no access to? I can't even imagine all of the self-education that goes on in these peer communities, the tools, long before sales even gets a seat at the table. So that's where I'd like to level set this conversation with that reality in mind. What are some of those other mindsets? Let's broaden the scope a little bit. We're two marketers on this call. Go-to-market teams in general. What are some of those mindsets that we might need to unlearn as we head into 2026. And I shouldn't say head into 2026. We're in it, but we've got a long way to go. So from your perspective, what are some of the mindsets that come to mind right out of the gate?
Yeah. So first and foremost, just staying dynamic, right? We can't stay stagnant in this environment. Things are constantly changing. We've learned so much this year with, hate to say it, because it's on every podcast, every session, every workshop, at every conference, AI, right? So that is a lot of where buyers are going and utilizing to get a lot of their information in what we call this dark funnel, where they exist before they exist to us. So I think the biggest thing for teams to unlearn is the info dump. We can't just regurgitate all of the things that we do for every industry, for every type of buyer at every point in time. We need to start to reframe a lot of these conversations and approach buyers as a trusted partner and establish ourselves as a trusted partner, one that provides value, one that understands the nuance of their situation. I think the better we can do that, the more successful we'll be and the more human conversations we'll have.
I totally hear what you're saying. I think it goes back to something that a lot of folks, and this is coming from a marketing perspective, but I think it translates to sales as well, the habit of jumping right into the product pitch and leading too hard into the education side versus actually not educating from zero, going into this mindset of here's why we should still be in consideration, and demonstrating that you have a deep understanding of who they are, what their needs are, what their pain points are, and earning that relevance in a really fast way, asking the good questions to unpack that and listening more than you speak. I think that's really important. And obviously this is a very sales oriented podcast, but from your perspective, what is marketing's role in helping prepare, enable, make that process easier? What can we be doing to get our sales teams further down that path?
I think if we can level set on, certain maybe intent signals that we're looking for, things that we're monitoring, if we're keeping track of whether our ICP is changing companies, if there's a new industry that's popping up, if there's all of these different signals that could show that somebody might be coming into market or it might be a good time to start to engage. If we can clearly communicate those to a sales team and tell them how to interpret them and inform them of a few next steps or a few pieces of content that could be helpful follow-up pieces, that forms a strong partnership. That instills trust in the marketing team that they're delivering the right signals, and it instills trust in the sales team that they're using the pieces that marketing's working hard to create.
Yep. And I think as a marketer too, it's important to recognize that all of that intel, it's hard to get all of that information squished onto a lead record. And so it really comes down to where your role as the director of demand gen, but also owning the marketing operations function is so critical in a good go-to-market team, because you have to set up these systems to make it easy for that flow of information to go from the top of the funnel all the way down to the bottom. So talk a little bit about that. Like, what are some ways, some tactical ways, some practical ways that marketing teams can help facilitate that flow of information to give sales the insights that they need?
It's a constant conversation with both the sales team and with rev ops and with, product marketing, product teams, making sure that everyone's in lockstep on that. But when you look at records within a CRM, you want to have a consistent place that you can go to see, okay, how did a lead or a record get into our system? How did it get assigned to me? Why does that matter? What are the next steps to take? And where can I consistently look to see where all of these things happen? I have yet to find a company that's perfect at it. I know that we aren't. That's the dream, right? To be able to consistently find things. If we can create consistency in one spot, that can compensate for the chaos that happens in the market.
And not to mention, make your sales and marketing functions that much more aligned and build that trust. We all want to be operating off the same information, and we want to be validating that the information we're seeing is accurate, it's insightful. What might be valuable on a lead record might not be as valuable on the sales side as well. And we need that constant flow of information so that we're scoring our leads in an appropriate way, so that our lead quality is maintaining the integrity that it needs to maintain. So I love how tactical these conversations get when we get in the weeds of like bringing in people from various functions and talking about their role and why it's important, because it really sheds a light on how a good go-to-market team can be a well-oiled machine. And it's been a lot of fun. There was something you mentioned earlier that I'd like to double click into, and that was around this black hole of information, all these things that are happening before a lead, a buyer even enters our purview. If this role of the seller is being reframed from pure education to having to earn relevance, if buyers are forming opinions before sales even comes to the table, then a lot of what actually matters is happening outside of the traditional funnel that we have access to. So where is this happening? Where are they forming their opinions? How do we get access to that? What's going on?
A lot of this research is taking place in AI. Your LLMs, your ChatGPTs, your Perplexities, anywhere that you're typing in your questions and getting your perfectly curated answers, whether they're 100% accurate or not. It's getting better every day. They're in peer communities. They're in networking groups. They're on LinkedIn. It's happening. If I can give a solid piece of advice to any seller out there, give me your hot takes on LinkedIn. I want to see them. I want to see something that's outside of the normal copy paste from ChatGPT. I think that that's going to be a big trend in 2026. I think that something that we've run into a lot is going to ChatGPT to create all of these posts and all of this content for us, which is great. But at the same time, it only knows what it knows. At this point in time, our LLMs are not creating brand new knowledge. So if there is insight, if there are connections that you can make, again, those nuanced perspectives that you have as a seller, I mean, that's gold right there. That's stuff that can't be researched outside of the funnel. That requires human interaction. And that puts you right at the forefront of a consideration set when it comes time to make a sale.
And emphasizes the importance of a human-centric element to a good sales professional.
Absolutely.
So we talk a lot about that's the where, right? So let's move it into the what. What are those behaviors that matter? From our perspective, we want to know what they are because that helps us score our leads. That helps us determine what we need to look out for, what's going to trigger something in your brain as a marketing operator and a demand gen professional that says, this is interesting. We need to flag this. We need to pass this intel along to a sales team so that they also can start to recognize those high funnel behaviors that matter.
Sure. There are a lot of intent tools out there for intent topic searching, your Bomboras and stuff like that. But you can also look for signals like job changes, which is something you can easily find on LinkedIn, promotions, mergers and acquisitions, capital funding. These are all signals. And again, there is no silver bullet. It's going to be a little bit different for every industry and every product that's going to market. But those are things that you can keep an eye on. And I think another strong trend in 2026 is going to be the closed won retrospective. Can we take a look at this deal and track it back to the very first pieces of intent that we saw? You know, was it a job change that triggered this whole thing? Was it a certain infographic download? Was it just a connection on LinkedIn? And I think that that's going to provide a lot of insight. And with all of these, I hate to call them sharks in the water, but everyone's fighting for the same deals out there. And if there's a way to get an edge, to get a little bit more insight, I think that that's going to be a strong play.
Hi there. If you're listening to this show, it means you believe in making a difference in your customers' lives and are looking for tools to grow in your career at the same time. At Integrity Solutions, we're changing the stereotypes about sales training in ways your customers will feel and experience every day. If you want to learn more about how we could help you and your team, go to integritysolutions.com. Well, and all these tools have been a dream to a marketer because it helps us translate those patterns into triggers that just make the process more seamless, addressing those signals. We can create nurture streams off of that. We can pass it along much more quickly. I think it also helps too. I'd be remiss not to call out that old mindset of, well, we need better lead data. We need better intel on who these people are, where I think a newer mindset to maybe adopt in 2026 is we just need to have a better interpretation of what these signals are telling us. I think these tools are going to come a long way. They've got a long way to go based on, you and I know we get demo requests all the time for the latest and greatest. And it's like, what can this really do? So there's a level of discernment when you're taking a look at the latest AI shiny new toy. But I think just having an understanding of the types of signals to look for and a good interpretation of what they might mean, coupled with things like, I always go back to Integrity Solutions gap model and asking better questions, because for me, when I started and I was learning more about the gap model, and I realized how just asking better questions can unlock greater outcomes. I realized the questions I was asking were just so basic, and it was a real aha moment for me. So this is really, really powerful. I'd like to shift this into a messaging conversation, which is kind of the world we live in, right? As marketers, it paints a little bit different picture of this higher funnel than what most teams are really used to looking at. You know, if this buying behavior, if it's happening in the communities, if it's happening in the peer conversations, the internal Slack threads, it's not happening right in our Salesforce dashboards. Our challenge as marketers is then turning those insights into something that's usable. And it's not just for the marketers, right? Because we also work directly with sales teams on an enablement capacity. And we know sales teams are using outbound tools like SalesLoft, also creating messages and doing outbound activity on a day-to-day basis. We're all in sales, we're all in marketing. Like, everyone has to do this in a way that's going to resonate. So what types of messaging is what's resonating with buyers today? Why does that type matter more than just info sharing?
Yeah, the info dump. You've got to start with human connection. So humans innately, I think a lot of us would believe and agree, humans want to help humans. So if we can lead with a problem, if we can solve a problem, if we can just show that we understand, I think that that's just a lot more interesting to consume than here's X, Y, and Z, and you should buy it. Because again, that's something that I can search on my own. I can type that into ChatGPT and have it fed back to me. So I want real empathy. I think it's missing. It's missing in so many ways today, but especially in the sales world, especially when everyone has an AI chatbot, automatic outreach to folks. The more that we can pull a human in and the more that we can make these conversations human, the more they're going to resonate.
You hit on human, you hit on empathy. And I think what the power in bringing those two together is because it makes that empathy contextual. And that's something that at the moment, who's to say 5 years from now, but that's something that the LLMs can't do because you have this context above and beyond just whatever content's been fed into those LLMs.
Yeah. As far as we've gotten right now with LLMs, they've turned into a little bit of yes men, I've noticed. It seems anything I type in, I'm applauded as the greatest genius of our time. And that's not what I want. I want a little bit of pushback. I want different perspectives. Again, I want that contextual empathy and saying, hey, I understand that this is a huge friction point for you in your everyday life and in your job. What if we approached it this way? Or what if you could just remove that friction point?
Well, not to mention when you're in a sales conversation and you're approaching a buyer that on the surface might not seem as far down the funnel, but by asking the right questions and incorporating a little bit of that friction all of a sudden they're open to something that they weren't at the beginning of the conversation.
Right. Because they had never thought of it that way. And
Exactly.
that's the way that all LLM conversations have to start, is I am thinking of it this way. And I would like you to agree with me and tell me why I'm right.
Interesting. So these are all insights
Yes.
that we get from digital signals that we need to translate into conversations. How can we take those insights and turn them, like, how do we take all of this and bring it to a sales team in a tangible way? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, like, I want to make all of this helpful for a sales audience in a tangible, tactical way. What are the tools that they need? What is the language that they need? What is the enablement that they need? As marketers, what can we be bringing to them to give them the language, the questions, the confidence they need to approach these conversations in a more thoughtful way in 2026 and beyond?
It starts with a foundational alignment. We touched on that earlier, but knowing what your definition of a lead is in MQL, in SQL, close lost, close won reasoning. If we don't have alignment on that, we're not getting anywhere because we're not speaking the same language. So I think it starts with that. From there, I think just staying at the roots of who you are as a brand and your brand story. We always like to say that, integrity is in our name for a reason, and that is what we lean on. And that is the confidence that we bring to the table, that we instill in our people. We have salespeople who sell with integrity. We market with integrity. We believe that we are forming these partnerships, and we know that sales doesn't have to be grody, right? It can be a mutual creation of value. It can be a partnership. We can do this with someone and not to them.
I think that is a perfect spot to wrap, because you gave me the warm and fuzzies when you brought up the integrity piece. It really is about those shared values and coming back to your core and not losing sight of that at the end of the day. I mean, we talked a lot about AI and the future of things and what's next, but it comes down to that. I think if you lose sight of that, then I think everything else kind of starts to fall apart. And then what's the point? Couldn't have wrapped it in a better way. But that said, I would like to wrap it a different way with a little rapid fire. Thinking about this conversation today, I'd like to get a sense of some of your sales and marketing ins and outs for 2026. What would you say one or two things that are in this year? Sales and marketing, trends, anything in general.
Yeah, in would be personalized, but personalized in a way that is quality over quantity. We can personalize at scale, but making sure that it's still hitting the mark of that human touch.
I would agree.
And I think, on the flip side of that, out is the generic messaging, the info dumping, the features without the feeling.
Talking about personalization is not new to 2026. I think back to conferences I went to early in my career, and I feel like personalization was the buzzword before AI. But we still see a lot of really generic, vanilla, bad messaging out there.
Yeah.
Every day. It's hard to not, fall on what's safe, what's boring. Maybe what's in is like just being a little outside the box this year.
Yeah.
Okay, and what's out in your perspective?
We can't wait for the perfect lead.
Say more about that.
I think it goes back to what we touched on with the sharks in the water. Everyone's waiting for the perfect lead, and it would be great if everything was a yes before they walked in the door. But the sooner we can jump, the better. And if we can identify those imperfect signals that translate to a perfect sale and a perfect partnership, that's what we got to do.
A good marketing department is your partner in helping decipher those signals.
Yes.
So to all the sales leaders out there, be a partner with marketing and have that be an ongoing conversation, because the more aligned you are, the more tools you have in your tool belt and the more gasoline in your tank. And I'm out of metaphors because it's 4:45 p.m. on a Friday. But you get the gist. Couldn't agree more.
That's fair.
All right. Those were solid. One more question for you. Here's a little personal fun fact for the listeners of Mental Selling. I collect Santa Clauses. and my collection is up to 53. I mention this because I have to take all of my books off of my bookshelf to fit them over the holidays, put my Santas up, and I just recently took all my holiday decorations down, put my books back, and I don't know what happened this year, but in the process of taking the Santas, packing them away, putting my books back, I realized I have room for more books. So I would like to know from you, what was the best book you read in 2025? And what's next on your shelf to read in 2026 to give me some recommendations to fill up my bookshelf?
All right. In 2025, I think one of the most relevant books that I read was about content marketing, but taking it one step further and focusing on the content experience. I would give you the actual book title, but it is a little bit explicit. But F-bomb content marketing, if you will. Okay. But taking it one step further into a content experience, and this book was written before the age of kind of this short form bingeable content that we're, seeing on Reels and on TikTok and stuff. But I think it plays well into that is, how do we really captivate a prospect or a buyer, and how do we enable them to continue on their own learning journey through content and digest it and experience it in the way that they want, so that we can get them into a position where they don't feel like they've been, forced to continuously, consume. They're kind of on their own journey until they're ready to be a hand raiser. So
fabulous. Well, I'll definitely be borrowing that one from you.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'll just buy it myself so that I can actually put it on my bookshelf.
There you go.
Okay, fantastic. So that you read that in 2025. What about what's next for 2026?
I hate to say it, but I have not read Atomic Habits yet. So I think that that's a good kick off the year sort of book. So I'm excited to dive in there.
You're going to love it. I said it at the top and I'll say it again. I could not think of a better first guest to kick off the first recorded episode of 2026 with. Thank you for coming on Mental Selling again. Thank you for joining the Integrity Solutions team. For those of you who don't know, joined the team in May of last year. And so just been rocking and rolling ever since. This was a fabulous episode. Lots of fantastic nuggets for our listeners to take away as they look to the year. So thank you. And we'll chat soon.
Yeah, and thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Mental Selling. If today's conversation resonated with you, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. For more insights on how to go beyond winning deals and build real customer relationships, visit integritysolutions.com. See you next time.